Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, September 5th. Special shout out to the Live Hive joining us here on YouTube. Got a great show lined up. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May, all here with you. We have an extension, a September contract extension. You rarely see that. Matt Chapman getting a long-term deal to stay with the Giants. We'll dig into that. We had a combined no-hitter from the Cubs on Wednesday. We have a 10th birthday to celebrate again. Baseball's replay system, which people were pretty mad about when it was introduced, but I feel like most of us have become comfortable with it. We'll talk about a few things we'd like to see changed, maybe before the replay system can go buy some beer down the road. We're going to take a look at an attempt to quantify predictability of pitchers and their decisions on the mound. We'll look at some pitches that are actually predictable, like they do what hitters think they're going to do, and a few that don't. So predictability, a big theme of the show today. And maybe we'll take a few questions throughout the show as well. So we get started today with Matt Chapman, who's going to be in San Francisco for the long haul. It is a 6-year extension to keep Matt Chapman with the Giants, $151 million. Because of the contract he had signed this past offseason, he had an opt-out coming up this winter. He was going to use that because it's been a great season again for Matt Chapman. A couple things kind of jumped off the page looking at what he's done so far this year, guys. Lowest K percentage we've seen from Matt Chapman since 2019, 24.4%, right? To see that number kind of trend back in the right direction for a player on the wrong side of 30, I think that's encouraging. It's a sign of a bat that might age pretty well. And he's 13 for 15 as a base stealer. This is a guy that had 11 career steals entering this season. So, the plate skills look good. He's added this speed element, and the defense is still elite. 13 defensive runs saved, ties him for 5th across all positions in baseball this season. That makes him first at third base. Tons to like here. I think the only question would be, how well does the entire package age? Because 6 years is a long time, and year one of that deal next year will be Chapman's age 32 season.
Yeah, I mean, you have one position player in baseball this year, one that's over the age of 35. That's going to be the league average. One. Can you guys guess? You already know, I think.
We did this once. I should remember.
Yeah, it's Carlos.
Yeah.
And so he's so very not Carlos Santana, which is interesting. But I think in terms of the things that age well, I mean, what you're getting with Chapman is he does the things that don't age well really well. So maybe he's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, bat speed doesn't age that well. He has bat speed in like so much of it. He's like, I think like in the top 5 or something in bat speed. Defense doesn't age well. Well, he's got elite defense. So I think he could be one of the few 35 pluses. This deal is paying him to 37. If you look at the projections and you just age him like we used to age players, this is a market level deal. $8 to $10 million per win. That's market level. Joey Votto's comments about this being a young man's game now make me wonder if our aging curves are off a little bit now with the new rules and stuff like that. And just the fact that there's just nobody over 35, just one guy over 35 that's doing it right now makes me wonder if maybe the last 2 years of this deal will be eaten at some point. But I do think that he will be an above average player, above average offense, good defense, and good power for the next 3 years at least.
Yeah. This is very Giants move to me. I feel like they like to have their leader. I think that from what I've heard anecdotally, I've never played with Matt Chapman, but from Chris Bassett and Seth Brown and the way this guy is in a clubhouse and the way he kind of keeps, like, he's one of the hardest working day-to-day, like, no nonsense type of guys. Very like he's got very like some combination of like Mad Bum and Buster Posey's personalities together in one guy. He can be really intense, but he can also be super laid back. And I think that in San Francisco, that's something they pay attention to, and that factors in, I think, more than maybe other places. Like a guy that's he's at least going to have that fire, and they anticipate him having that for the entirety of his contract. So I don't know how much money that makes you, but it's something to keep in mind that he's a guy that I've heard stories like this or people speak about him like this, like dozens now of people have mentioned it. And I bet you that has come through big time, because in terms on paper, it's not like he's, been above and beyond anywhere he's ever been before. He's been a very good player, but I bet you that was maybe what pushed it over the ledge and got it done.
I mean, he is,
We want to be here. We want to be here for a while, and we know you're going to bring this value. This is guaranteed for the entire time, and that's going to make everyone around you better. And we would like to not have to worry about that anymore. Who's going to be the leader in our clubhouse? So,
yeah, makeup wise, that's a good thing to bring up. Makeup wise, he's a really, really hard worker, and to the point where sometimes it can get a little bit rough. Where he's like if it's not going well, he's grinding. He's in there taking swings and swings and swings. That sometimes I would want to be like, Matt, go watch a movie or something, But it's
motivating guys is harder than getting them to slow down.
Right, exactly. And I think this is a good sign for for younger players. To have a Matt Chapman be one of the veterans on your team. He's progressive when it comes to data and tech. Like he cares about the numbers, he cares about the hard work, he cares about the right things, I think. And then you have these young guys coming in, Tyler Fitzgerald, Heliot Ramos, all these guys. I think that that's a good role model to have in the clubhouse. It reminds me a lot of Buster Posey in that sort of a little bit bordering on red ass, but like hard competitor is going to work every day and takes the job seriously. And that's a cool thing to have around.
Well, and I think that facet of makeup gives you a better idea as an organization of how a player might age. It gives you a better chance of fighting against the aging curve, no matter how you apply it, right? There's a lot of ways Matt Chapman brings that value, as you guys pointed out. But if he can kind of hold off the aging curve that ordinarily would come because of his ability to work that hard, put in the extra time, that also kind of helps, right? He ages more gracefully. The big question we had about Chapman coming off of last season was, can he pull the ball more often, right? Because a lot of the high quality contact he was making during his final season with the Blue Jays was pull side, oppo. We weren't seeing a lot of pulled barrels last year. And you can see, comparing his 2023 to 2024 charts, it's pretty different. He's pulling the ball a lot more.
It's really interesting because I was looking at his overall pull rate and being like, oh, he's not pulling it more. But his overall pull rate misses the difference between his pulled fly balls. Like he's going oppo in the medium distance. You can see that, right? Like you see those singles and doubles to the opposite field, but he's taking his chances and pulling the ball in the air more than he used to. So this is actually a fairly ideal spray chart if you think about it. This is a guy who can take something to the opposite field when he's sort of battling two-strike approach, trying to put high velo into play. He does that to the opposite field, and then every once in a while he anticipates a slider, or he's early on what he thinks is a fastball and he takes the slider out. Like, this is a pretty good spray chart if you ask me. On the right.
It's the adjustment that we hoped he was going to be able to make. And I think when you looked at just how hard he was hitting the ball a year ago, I thought it was easier to bet on that we're still enough bat speed. We didn't have bat speed metrics during the offseason. It would have been a great time to have them. But I thought there was still enough there skills-wise where adjustments could be made. And to see that he made them also bodes well for the long-term future as well. Do you guys think this is kind of an interesting spot, though, that the Giants are in? You retain a key piece of the roster. It's great to have Chapman for the next 6 years. Blake Snell, also a guy that can opt into free agency, and by all accounts will do that unless he reaches a similar extension in the next few weeks. What's the outlook for the Giants in 2025 as a team that's just kind of on the outside looking in at the playoff picture right now? A team that still looks like it's a player or two away. Jung-Hoo Lee's been hurt for most of the year, so they'll get him back from injury. So there's one addition already who's there but not present because of that absence. What do you think this offseason holds? Can they push more chips in and have a better winter than the Cubs did a year ago, for example? Like the Cubs kind of did the same thing, brought a lot of pieces back, ran it back with the same roster, and they're having a hard time closing the gap on the teams that were ahead of them. So, do you think the Giants can find more this offseason, Trevor, to bridge the gap between where they are now and where they actually want to be?
I feel like they're close. I feel like there's some things that have come together and then other things that haven't, and it just kind of feels like it's stuttering. But there are a couple things slotting into place, I think, between being battling for the top of that division, and it comes kind of tough too because of the nature of the other 3 teams ahead of them in the division and how well they've been playing and kind of how they're kind of on the up and up, especially Arizona. So that timing's not great for them, and the Dodgers are the Dodgers. But I think that they're like maybe a middle of the lineup type of piece away. I think that if they could just add or get a young guy to blossom into a star as opposed to like a solid player. Because I think that Bailey's their catcher. I think they found their guy from Buster, so that's kind of taken care of. Their bullpen has always notoriously been good. That place is easier to pitch, especially early in the year. So they've found pieces there. Ryan Walker's been really good. They got a Logan Webb. They got a guy who can start the game one if they don't retain Snell. Like they got a lot of the things you need to be good and be good for a long time. It's just they just need 1 or 2 more things to happen at the same time as all of those things. So Heliot Ramos, taking a step forward was big. So yeah, I think they're just 1 or 2 bats. And this isn't like we need a guy to hit 50 homers. Like that's just not something, unless you have Barry Bonds, that's just not something you can expect in that park. But if you can go, you can have someone maybe find a diamond in the rough, which I don't think they've done. Like with that was kind of something we thought Farhan was pretty good at, and he hasn't really done it as much since he's been there. So it'd be interesting to see if they got someone from somewhere else, more a prospect in a trade or something, to come on and become a big part of their team. I feel like we've been kind of waiting for that to happen, and it hasn't quite happened yet. So, but I just don't think it's that many steps. I think it's 1 or 2 steps away.
Yeah, they have money. They've been a team that goes up to the at least 200 million most years, if not closer to the luxury tax of 230. The difference between 200 million and what they have next year is probably around 50 to 60 million dollars. So they've got some money. This is with Snell not re-signing, though. So if Snell re-signs, they've got maybe 1 big free agent, or they spread the money around. I think spreading around the money around doesn't make much sense for this team anymore. This is the team that has put together the pieces. They have some young guys coming up. I think it's a big name or bust. And so that has been a consensus of people that kind of look at Farhan's strengths at building the roster from the bottom up. He's good at that. They've tried very sort of obviously to go and get the big star and have failed. The big star this year is Juan Soto. Will Pete Alonso count, especially when you have Bryce Eldridge as your best prospect coming up? That's going to be a fascinating discussion. If Cody Bellinger opts out, is that a good fit for them? There's questions. I think, once you start talking about mid-level guys, you don't need another Matt Chapman. He's a mid-level free agent. You need a bigger score. And I wonder if they're going to do that. I bet, the way Farhan works, it's going to be probably a couple other pieces, and hope it works out better than last year.
Yeah, only one Juan Soto to go around, as a bunch of teams are going to learn this winter once he hits the open market. But Bryce Eldridge, by the way, just got promoted to Double-A this week already. So you could see a world where maybe this time next year he's breaking in and actually getting an opportunity for this Giants team. But I could see Pete Alonso being maybe a short-term option. That's where the Giants have also lived more often than not in the Farhan era in free agency, is finding guys that just need a bridge contract, guys that didn't get what they wanted in free agency, offering up something flexible with the opt-outs, and then getting someone to exceed expectations. They did it with Carlos Rodon. They're doing it with Blake Snell. Maybe they'll do it with someone like Pete Alonso, because we've talked about Alonso a few times over the course of the year. It doesn't seem like the massive deal he was going to get a couple of years ago is going to be on the table right now. But one huge season, especially in another pitcher and friendly environment like San Francisco.
Would he sign like a 3-year with a 1-year opt out? That's like the Giants special.
Yeah.
Would he sign that to go to San Francisco?
He has Scott Boras as his agent. So there's step 1.
Yeah. Ticks the boxes, right? We'll have to see where it goes from here. Let's move on to the Cubs for a minute, though. They threw a combined no-hitter against the Pirates yesterday. Shota Imanaga doing most of the heavy lifting, going 7. We had Nate Pearson and Porter Hodge out of the pen. A covering those last two frames. I thought it was funny when I saw the wild card standings last night. I think the Cubs are now 4.5 back of a wild card spot. I look at Fangraphs this morning. Fangraphs playoff odds are 1.6%. It's another one of those times where I understand enough about the math to realize that it's probably right, but it still doesn't feel intuitively right. That seems like more of a long shot than they really are, because this is not a bad Cubs team. Like we've talked about their bullpen woes a lot on this show, and it does seem like they're starting to pick up some momentum at a critical time in the schedule. So I'm not quite ready to bury them completely, even though they are kind of part of that group of teams that we were waiting for the last 2 months for them to go on a run to really close the gap, and maybe they're going to do it just a little bit later than expected.
The spread of the pool, I think the spread of the field is what's causing these things. Just because, like the nature, like the Mets have won 7 straight, and they're still behind the Braves. And you have to and one of those two teams is going for one spot, and then we have the other two teams that are the first and second seed that are also not letting the other two be able to catch them. So like the 4 teams ahead of them are all winning. I think that's what it comes down to. And it's like that in both leagues. Like, sure, that's close, but everyone's close. And it comes down to I think a number of teams crunch as opposed to like, your ability to win. Like they're just kind of computing whether or not, if you win all your games, it might not still matter because someone else might do it and you still won't get in. So, but yeah, it feels like there's some teams making pushes here at the end, and it's an interesting way. I thought these races would be really interesting because of this, but in reality, it's like though teams aren't statistically, eliminated, feels like they are, even though they're pretty close because there's too many teams involved. So it's kind of doing the opposite. For the excitement thing, because they're all kind of playing each other and everyone's kind of holding steady. So it's like shaking out a little earlier, even though they're not going to be able to pop any champagne bottles until probably the last 3 days of the season. Everyone's going to kind of stay generally in the same spots they're in, with the exception. I think the Mets and Braves is a really, really exciting, I think, race that I'm having a blast.
That's the last one for me. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, Yankees O's is like a real thing, but both are going to be in the playoffs. So it's like people are like, oh, the seeding is up. I mean, do I care about seeding? Maybe if that's my team, I care if they, get a bye.
It doesn't matter 5 days in. You're like,
yeah, yeah, right. Then we're like, we don't care anymore, So I feel like the real in-out race is Braves Mets, and I did. Brad Johnson is a writer who's written for me before, and he said, what if like we always have like the one team that goes like 15-4, in September and makes it a race. And I guess if I circled one team that could do that, it would be the Cubs. So it is interesting they had this combined no-hitter, and they have some interesting pieces. It is a team where like, oh, if the pitchers rattle it off and the hitters are there, like that would be the one team that maybe could outperform a 1.6% chance at making the playoffs. But a 1.6% chance of making the playoffs is exactly that. It's not zero. They could do it, but if they do it, it's going to be one of those legendary, things that we talk about, where it's like the time that the Phillies, did really poorly in September, and we'll be talking about somebody collapsing. It'll not only be the Cubs 15-4, it'll be the Mets and Braves, both just totally sucking, which will be hard for them to do because they'll be playing each other. So if they play each other, you know what I mean? Like that's what Trevor's point was. There's a lot of like, how could somebody go 4-15 if they're also going to be playing other teams that are in the race?
It might be a bunch of splits in those series. Yeah.
In 2022 with the Mets, a lot of people bring up the collapse and how that
was it. Mets and Phillies, right? Mets collapsed and Phillies came on.
Mets and Braves.
Oh, Mets and Braves.
Braves caught us, and we had the same record at the end of the year, but then they beat us in the series. They swept us when we needed to win one game and all kind of stuff. And this was the collapse. But in the last 99 games of the season, I think the Braves went like 71-27. So like, I was like, I don't know what you guys want us to do when a team's 45 games over 500 in 99 games. Like that's really hard to fend off that team. And it was I always had to try to defend us and just say, we got to give a little props for like one of the best 100-game stretches in the last 20 years as well.
I feel like team
doesn't do that,
You can see those stretches coming a little bit longer. Like we don't see that coming right now. There's
Yeah,
nobody that's like been hot for a while. You're like, oh, these guys have been coming for a while. It's just
I guess
more like,
historical runs have to happen the same time. One winning, one losing.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how you flip odds that are that low into an actual playoff spot. So it could happen, but it doesn't seem very likely, and that's reflected very accurately in those odds. Let's move on to the baseball replay system turning 10 years old. We love to have cakes on this show, especially ones we don't have to bake ourselves.
Did you make a cake?
Yeah, I made a cake.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Google Gemini made a cake. It's amazing because it is it's a baseball diamond shaped square cake turned
That
sideways.
could be on Is It Cake, dude? It looks like a book with a thing on top, a screen
Yeah.
on top of it.
Yeah, and the replay monitor it generated is actually like probably about the right size because if you remember when replay was new, they'd kind of huddle up behind home plate
like a
on the
little hood, yeah.
smallest television screen ever. Obviously, it's improved in the years since. It doesn't quite work that way anymore, but I think Google Gemini reimagined what that screen looked like and kind of nailed it. It almost looks like they've got a shot of Miller Park there too, if you look really closely at the detail. So
You just see Miller Park everywhere.
I see Miller Park everywhere. Yeah,
Frosting. That's crazy.
yeah. So the writing terrible as always, but looks like a good enough cake to eat. I
Oh
think.
yeah, that
Just-
looks like a different language.
yeah, it's definitely not English. So that's I don't even know if it's a real language. It might just be random scribbles for all I can tell. But 10 years into the replay system, what's really working well so far? What do we like about it? And what are your pet peeves? What needs to change as we try and make this even better in the future, right? I mean, I think there's the worst one for me. I think this is something Eno brought up during our meeting earlier in the week. The reviews of slides, usually it's at second base, right? Where a player slides into second base and they're safe and their momentum is pulling them through the bag. And for a split second, while the tag is still applied, they come completely off the bag and they're out on review. And you're like, all right, is that what this was actually intended for? Or is this just a unintended consequence of a system that does make the game better? Right? Like that to me is like the one particular play that I wish they could tweak or fix and just not have impacted quite the same way it has been by replay.
It's like, is replay like you need to sometimes state your goals when you have things. It's like, is replay supposed to get all the things we could get right? Like that we could get right as human beings? Is that the point? Then these pop-up slides, you could never get that right as a human being. Like they're looking at things that you would never be able to see, like little millimeters of missing contact with the base or whatever, and so that's why I don't love that. If it's to get everything 1000% correct, then sure. But you can also, I guess, change the rules and make it so that you sort of own the space above the bag. So the pop-ups, you can sort of hit the bag and be above it, but do not slide past it. I mean, you can change rules to make it better, or you could say what's reviewable or what's not, because there are a bunch of things that are not reviewable. I think like check swings are not reviewable.
Right. Yeah, you can't call replay review for check swings.
Which I kind of like, because there's a lot of check swings, and I'd hate to go to replay on a lot of those,
Yeah.
I think there could be some alterations to it. I think there should be a hard clock on them.
Yeah, I was gonna say
minute or something.
From Trevor playing in the replay system and playing for a little while before it, right? Like, did you notice like the long pauses when there's an you can tell, you obviously notice them on TV, but I kind of feel like depending on the situation, you might benefit from it. Like if you're out there, you're tired, 2 or 3 minutes to catch your breath might actually be a good thing. But how much does it feel disruptive in the flow of the game when you're playing?
Yeah, it's even worse in person. When they go really long, when there's some hang up, someone is in the booth in New York or something that is like not great at making, or they're
arguing or
whatever. Sometimes, like a lot of times, you can throw your hands up like, what is going on? And no one knows because no one's in the room, right? They're just not giving them an answer. They're waiting for an answer. Like the guys in the field are to their spots quickly. It's not like they just have to get the feedback, and they're not. That gets slow, that gets disruptive, and it just gets annoying. I honestly, as a pitcher, like if it's out in the field, I just want the play right. Like at that, like I can wait forever because I just at the end of the day, I just want it to be right. But yeah, it can turn into a slog. It's not happening as much. They're definitely dialed it in. But I think you're right. I think that I think we have an issue with this a lot of times, like setting a very, very clear standard, kind of like if there's not enough to overturn it, then it stays the same. That's clear to me. I think that you say that to a guy who gets upset about a play being overturned or not overturned. You say that to him, usually they're like, yeah, you're right. I know that. I know that standard. But like there's other things in the game that we don't have any clear standards for, and it makes no sense. Like sticky stuff. It's arbitrary. We don't know.
Oh my God.
We have no test. We have no like thing. Like we have no sticker you put on. If it sticks, you're out.
That's so easy. Go out there with a wiffle ball, like a ball of some weight, and then stick it to the hand. And if it falls, you're fine. If it sticks to the hand, you're out.
Anything. There's gotta be tests for the stickiness of something.
I looked into it. There are machines, but it's like it'd be pretty funny if they had like a machine in the dugout where you're like, put your hand on the machine.
That would be funny. But I mean, if you want to do it, you gotta do it consistently. So
it's better than like some dude manhandling. There's the whole like Bumgarner one where he was like really massaging Bumgarner's hand and looking him in the eyes.
Very weird.
So weird.
It's we're not good at doing this. I think that some of the standards here are crazy. So like establishing what do we want from the replay? Do we want every play?
Yeah, what's your mission statement?
Not reviewable then. If we want every play right, why or something? So you just got to be very clear on what you're looking for, and then everyone can live with it at that point. But I think we could continue to get a little bit better at that. And I like the hard clock being like, you have 10 seconds. You got to just say yes or no to me, guys in New York, and then we got to run with it because we ran out of time, and then we can argue from there. I'm sure because I'm sure some stuff will get messed up because of that. So speed is the name of the game. I kind of understand them. We got the pitch clock, so we gotta figure this out a little bit better too, I think.
Yeah, and I think we're at the point now too where even the expectation of the challenge coming from the dugout has a time on it. You see a lot of managers, the hand is up for a second, like, hold on, we're checking. The other guy's on the phone in the background, and then it's the wave it off or a handset or headset gesture that initiates it. But that seems like it's getting a little better over time too. I think the other thing I would think about, like for improvements, would just be like we've seen automated balls and strikes in the minors. We talked about how they use basically like a tennis system for challenges. I think that's great. I think we need that. I think that's the next iteration of this that will make the game a lot more fun and a lot more fair. I think fans are going to go nuts for close ball strike calls that get overturned in their favor.
I think it'll be fun. I've seen it in tennis that the crowd actually makes this sort of noise where the balls come in, they go, oh, and like more audience participation. I think it could be fun. And then you have there's more strategy. You have the whole like, we have like one challenge left and it's the 8th inning. Is that play big enough? And the hitter has to do it, or the catcher, somebody has to, make the challenge, and they have to have the confidence to do it, and it's not coming from the dugout. So that's like kind of a cool, like putting some power in the player's hands where they're like, nope, I am not striking out with the bases loaded in the 8th inning. Hit the helmet. Let's see that again.
Well, there's internal value put on your replay guy because every team has a guy in there watching the replay, and that's who they're talking to on the phone. There's value put on the guy in there and how good he is at his job. In New York, Harrison with the Mets. Shout out to Harrison. He also ate a bunch of sandwiches for some money once, so that was pretty cool. He's one of the guys.
Was he a cheesesteak guy?
He was. Oh, I don't think it was cheesesteaks. I think it was just like deli sandwiches. We had a bunch of them on a huge plate. They were huge. And we're like, bitch, can't eat 4 of those. And he's like, yes, I can. Anyway, Harrison's the man. But he is one of the most confident. You go, who's the best in the league? He's like, me. He worked in the commissioner's office for a while too. So like those guys getting it right, that your hit rate is really important for your team because you lose things, and there's a strategy to it. No one talks about it.
I want the metrics on like this hitter is really bad at challenges.
Yeah, exactly. I want the players to have to do that, and then how the management team or how the manager and stuff runs it, and whether or not like they have 2 and then they get to save 1. I think that every time you institute a new rule, if you can create a way where it's like a new game mechanic that has to be decided on by the team.
Add strategy. Oh, this
Strategy is
team
the best
totally
way.
empowers its players and says, "You guys do the challenge when you want." This other team is like, "Don't you do a challenge unless it's these situations."
Gonna become like the green light and stealing.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
similar to that. Do we trust you or do we not? And some guys are gonna separate themselves as really good at it. And then also you mentioned the tennis system with the ABS. I think ABS is the next step for sure. But there's no reason that because the same company that does all of the tennis and actually the Hawkeye that
It's
developed
Hawkeye.
all of this is in all the it's the same company. They have the same technology. So let's get some of these like line error or these line lasers where you can see where if it hits the line, it's in and out or not. Maybe we get those on the foul lines and the foul poles. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But
Right.
it exists. Maybe we throw a little laser that shoot up in the air and we can tell whether or not the ball crossed it.
Yeah,
So we
that
can
seems
actually tell
easy
if they're
enough. They
foul.
have
That'd be
that right
pretty
from
cool.
tennis. Oh,
Yeah.
and here's a fun little side thing. Right now, Whit Merrifield is very angry about being hit in the head, and he's on the competition committee. He's talking about they're going to have more penalties for hitting players in the head. I'm okay with that. Some guys, it's just a little bit wild. What I have seen is I've looked at the hit by pitch rise very closely. And what I found mostly is a huge rise, about 10 to 15,000 more high fastballs than we had 10 years ago. And I think high fastballs are actually harder to get out of the way. So that leads to more hit by pitches, more head hit by pitches. So, if you hear that, then you say, okay, maybe we could lower the zone. One nice thing about having ABS is if you want to change the zone, you can be very precise about it. And so what they've done in AAA is they've actually lowered this top of the zone because they're looking for fewer Ks at the top of the zone and fewer hit by pitches. The one thing that was weird though is when they did that, strikeouts and walks went up. So, the strike zone is something that we can use to make the game we want, but it doesn't always act the way you want it to. You do something and you think, oh, if we just lower the zone, strikeouts will go down. And all of a sudden strikeouts are up. And you're like, why?
Yeah, well, it's because now their challenges are helping the pitchers. Yeah, that's why we don't have ABS, by the way, yet, guys. It's been tested for years. The reason because they wanted it to help hitters, and it hasn't helped hitters as much as they wanted it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's it. They're trying to dial in like how can we get the increase in offense that we're trying to get here before we put it in the big leagues, and that's why it's taking so long. Why we keep being delayed.
So I always see challenge system first for sure.
Yeah, but that challenge system is going to be fun. Smokey Gator in the Live High. They had that system in the Florida State League. Funny watching a batter get punched out and then having the pitch get overturned back to a ball.
We had another one saying they'd seen it a lot in St. Paul. Was it the one you just had up before that? Was they'd seen the system in place in St. Paul and enjoyed it?
Yeah, it was Perry also from the Live Hive today. So tons of ground to cover, though, as we think about different ways this could change going forward. It's going to change.
One last weird note about the hit by pitch thing. Max Bay, who's going to come up again later, the creator of Stuff Plus, said he did a study while he was working for the team about hit by pitches, and he looked into it and he corrected for location, for velocity, for type of pitch, for everything he could correct. And he found that the same pitch, like if you just correct for everything, the same type of pitch leads to slightly more hit by pitches every year, which means there's a batter effect. And I put this together with there's a team in D1, I think, that was just like, hey, take the hit by pitch.
Yeah, we're going to get hit by more pitches than anyone ever.
There was a team this last year, I'm pretty sure of it, that just led the league in hit by pitches. And they're like, yep, we wear them. So maybe that's part of this is like the batter effect is maybe you have some armor on there. Maybe you're going to take the free pass.
Yeah, Jake Mintz wrote about this team back in June. It's a D3 program.
Oh, it's D3, okay.
It's Misericordia University.
There you go.
Can you imagine being recruited for your willingness and ability to lean into pitches? Like, we just
not
like
a great hitter.
Gets drilled in the elbow, stays in the game. He's fine. It's horrible. I wouldn't want to play on that team. It'd be terrible. No, I'm not into that at all. Let's get to our next topic. We're going to try and quantify a pitcher's predictability. We talk a lot about different things like hitters being surprised, and there's different ways to surprise a hitter, but the main one is not really falling into a pattern, right? Like it's interesting because Kerry Oler over at Fangraphs actually wrote about this earlier in the week. We'd been talking about it on the show a little bit recently, kind of wondering if there's a good metric out there. And we were thinking about, well, how would we quantify this? We probably need a situation like 2-0, 2-1, where you have pitchers asking a question, something to the effect of like, what's the nastiest pitch I can throw for a strike right here? And then the hitter knowing something about the pitcher, maybe sitting on that pitch, right? And what's this going to be? Like, how is this going to play out? Will something lose its effectiveness? So started running some queries and tried to
Dude, these guys violate, to try to see who throws the most in each count. These guys violate Trevor May's rule so hardcore. What was the rule? It's sort of like 60% or once.
Yeah.
We'll
like 2/3.
Look at the percentage on this. 90s.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, some of these are just amazing pitches. So top of this list are Kenley Jansen, Emmanuel Clase.
Yeah.
Like they throw those pitches a lot, and they don't actually do that badly. Even in this 2-0 and 2-1 counts, they throw them 95% of the time, and they still do well with them because they're great pitches.
Yeah.
Michael Kopech's fastball, I think, deserves to maybe be on that list in terms of, pretty hard to hit, even if it's coming. Kimbrel's fastball is going to come up again later when we start talking about shape. Kirby Yates's fastball, a little surprising, but a 0% slugging, even though he throws it 86% of the time in 2-0 and 2-1 counts. And then you start getting to ones where you're like, okay, Tanner Rainey, is your fastball good enough to throw this 85% of the time in 2-0 and 2-1 counts? He's given up 846 slugging. Pierce Johnson loves his curveball in 2-0 and 2-1 counts.
He loves his curveball.
He loves his curveball. He taught his curveball to you, Darvish. And people love his curveball. He's why he's in the league. But 917 slugging on this curveball in 2-0 and 2-1 counts because it's a good curveball, but it's not as good once you can anticipate it. So this is the role of anticipation where, some of these guys have good enough pitches where, Josh Hader's sinker, fine. Yeah. Emmanuel Clase's cutter, fine. But somewhere in the middle, your stuff plus David Robertson's cutter, probably not as good as it used to be. He's an older guy. It's still a pretty good pitch, but he throws it 81% of the time in 2-0 and 2-1 counts, and it's given up a 571 slugging. So as a hitter in these 2-0 and 2-1 counts, you can kind of pigeonhole these guys because they violate pretty heavily the rule of 67%.
Yeah.
What do you think here, Trevor? I mean, is there's got to be diminishing returns with anything you throw if you throw it too much, but there's got to be a certain threshold where your pitch is so good that you can get away with it. That's to me what a lot of this points to is like there are some guys that can overuse a pitch and still live to tell the tale because the quality is just that good.
Yeah,
the location's that good.
So like guys like Kenley, like you mentioned Kenley, like guys that throw or Hader, right? Hader throws 75% fastball all the time.
Right.
So
yeah.
You're going up knowing that is the pitch you're going to get. That's the pitch you're going to have to hit. Because the you might get one slider, and if you do, it's probably not going to be you don't want to hit the slider, you want to hit the fastball anyways. And so that is what going in against him. And then it comes down to just getting the barrel to where you need it to get to, and it's really hard to do because we've talked about his fastball and why it's crazy. So like Manuel Clase, 80% cutters, like these guys like that throw these pitches and kind of just I want to say it's kind of a wash at that point because it's like that all the time for all counts. So like when it doesn't change count to count and this counts included, then you're just as unpredictable or predictable as you are in every other count. So like the count doesn't matter at that point. It kind of just defeats the purpose. But if you throw one pitch, if you're showing like the example I gave when we were talking about this is like a 2019 situation. I remember CJ Crone telling me about how he looks at usage and counts specifically. He wants to find some gimme, some cookie, some free space in your bingo card. And at the time we faced Blake Snell in like June, and this is the year after he won his first Cy Young. He had thrown 100% changeup 2-0 to righties at that point, like 3 months into the season. And so he's like, if I get 2-0, I'm just sit on a changeup. He got one and he hit it off the foul pole. And I was like, that right there is an example of full sellout, full pitch. That is because Blake Snell's not a guy. He throws a 12% changeup. So like when 12% of your pitch is 100% in a certain account, that's when you can't do that. Those are the egregious ones because you're doing something that is not only predictable, but it's also usually not your best pitch Those are the types of guys I'm trying to check in on. And I would say like guys with curveballs like Pierce Johnson, for example.
That's it. It's not a fastball. A lot of those are fastballs and they're dominant fastballs. Pierce Johnson, if you can sit on the curveball, if you knew when the curveball is coming, you can do better on it.
Because generally the pinpoint command's usually lower on that pitch. The break's a little bit different and it's slower.
It's slower. You have more time. Yeah.
And he's trying to throw it over, and it's very clear he wants it to be in the box. Like that is something that you could sit on. A breaking ball that you know that he's trying to throw for a strike.
It's not his like a curveball. It's not a sizzling down below. It's like his lollipop in the zone curveball.
Yeah. So I would say focus hard on the guys who throw breaking balls or some off-speed pitch, because there's something they're worried about happening in that count, and they feel like throwing that pitch is going to reduce probably the damage. Usually, that's
they think their fastball is not that good.
Exactly. Or like if I throw a fastball, I can't throw a fastball. So what else am I going to throw? That's pretty clear to tell by these patterns.
Yeah. Hader is also really interesting because he's able to get away with certain things with his fastball, right? Like it's just not a normal fastball. It looks like a four-seamer, but it's not. And Trevor, you were trying to explain like this can't really be replicated, right? It's hard to teach it, much like trying to teach someone how to throw Mariano Rivera's cutter has been basically impossible since Mo retired. No one's thrown a cutter like that. So how does Hader do that? Like what makes that pitch work as well as it does?
Well, first of all, I think you sent me last night. I can't remember what the tool's called, but it's about like your hand position / your arm angle, and then how the ball
expected arm angle.
The move, and then how it does. So he has, I think, one of the best, in my opinion, that is deception, or a major part of deception, a major factor in it. And the way that he deceives people, he's funky too. He's left-handed, kind of goes across his body. He's very like long levered. All of that is a little bit like jarring to face. But then you add in the fact that it's spinning like a two-seam, like his grip. He holds it the same way Clay Holmes holds his, which is that doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any. Clay Holmes is like a top down, like it's like this.
Yeah, it's a top down, and the way they hold it now, they're the way they release the ball is completely different. But Josh's spins pretty consistently backspun. It's not like he gets on a weird axis where he's underneath the ball, top the ball, or whatever, and creates like some sort of movement. It's like a backspun two-seam grip that wobbles, meaning they're on both sides of the ball. The horseshoes are kind of going in and out, in and out. They're going back and forth, that are creating these big pockets of air.
Which would reduce movement, because if you have a seam catching on one, that's seam shifted wake. So if you had seam catching and you had it all seam on one side and not on the other, that would create push one way or the other. So what you're saying is it's being pushed in both directions. It's killing the movement.
So he's getting anti-movement, aka ride. So the effect, people keep telling me this on the internet and I forget it immediately, but on a four-seam fastball, when you backspin it, that Magnus effect, yes. Yeah. He's getting the Magnus effect similarly because the two seam on the other side of the ball away from where he's released it is also creating a little bit of that effect. So he's got a little bit of pocket of air underneath. So he's got three sides of the ball that basically he's created an air gutter through the air, throwing it, and it's keeping it on line, those high 90s. But guys see two seam. They see a two seam. So your natural
spin, they see the release point.
You're like, oh, this is gonna run. It has to. There's no way it can't. And then not only does it not, it's like 10.8 inches of drop, or 20. I think it's 10.5 inches of drop. Which, if it were classified as a four seam, he would be up there with Carter Crawford as the best riding four seam fastball. But it's not. It's the best riding sinker by far because it's not a sinker. But he would have the best four seam ride if it were, so. Nobody else has been able. We tried. We actually messed around with this last year. I have a theory, and I don't know. This is kind of throwing this out there. This may be a thread for you to pull on, maybe through this week. Is the idea? I don't know if you ever talked to catchers, but catchers being able to throw back the light when they threw back like a two seam and it would cut at you. So that's the opposite of what it's supposed to do. And I was always wondering, like, why do catchers able to do that? And they're creating a seam shift on the right side of the ball that's making it do that. That's what's happening, what they're doing. I think what Josh has done is he's been able to do it on both sides. So that's just like my first thing where I'm like, that's someone throwing a two-seam grip that is moving differently. That's the only example outside of Josh that I can think of where that happens. And so now I'm interested in watching catchers throw because I'm maybe there's some hand position or something.
I email myself ideas. So I just have an email chain of ideas.
Email yourself ideas.
Smart.
Yeah, I'm an old man, I guess. And so one of the emailed ideas is catcher mechanics on throws.
Yeah. There you go. So he does something no one else can do. We talked about Mariano Rivera with his cutter months ago, and how his induced vertical breaks like 4 inches bigger than any cutter in history. Hanley's he does that at times, but just cannot replicate it the same way Mo could. And I think we have, even in this, but we didn't have the technology back then, and now we have the technology, and I think people are still trying to figure out how to replicate Josh's release. And it's going to be really scary when they figure it out, because they're gonna eventually. Someone else is going to throw it, but it's going to be interesting to see if it's how much of it has to do with his like physiology, like the way he's put together, how much of it is teachable. We just don't know yet.
And I think to some extent, you mentioned this. Max Bay has an app called a Dynamic Dead Zone, and so we've been talking about. Let's actually start with the leaderboard. So this is the leaderboard of these are guys with a 5.4 foot release and lower. So these are low release points. The highest vert with the lowest release point. And so we know from the show that Shota Imanaga has this great vert from a low release point. Kikuchi has a pretty good one. Tanner Scott's on this list. Freddie Peralta's on this list. Craig Kimbrell, it actually has the lowest release point on this list, and yet is in this top group, this top 10 when it comes to vertical movement out of low release points. So I think Craig Kimbrell deserves some credit as one of the pioneers of these like sort of great flat fastballs, good IVB from a really low release point. And it's not even really obvious when you watch Kimbrell how low his release point is, but it's there. And Tanner Scott's a new version, I think, of Kimbrell. And so if you go, then this is Tanner Scott. Let's see. Let's watch this. Is it really obvious that his release point is that low? It doesn't seem like sidearm or something. It's just kind of low. Now look at this Dynamic Dead Zone app from Max Bay. So what you're looking at here is basically vertical movement versus horizontal movement. And then what he's shown in the middle, the yellow point in the middle, that is the expected movement given that arm slot, right? And then Tanner Scott's fastball is in red. And so what he's doing is, despite having a lower release point that people would kind of expect, give kind of more sinkerish movement, more drop, he is managing this good ride and he's staying up there. Just as an aside, Max Bay really wants to make G-force part of the conversation and talk about this in terms of acceleration. So Tanner Scott throws his fastball with 2/3 G-force vertically, which means that he's counteracting gravity by 2/3 with his fastball.
Ooh, I like that.
It does kind of make sense, right? It kind of works, but it is a new lexicon, new item in the lexicon that people will complain about. They're talking about G-forces now with pitching. What's wrong with baseball today?
It's another physics term, weirdos. We're going to use them all, probably.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to auditing a physics class next semester so I can better understand things that are happening at work.
A lot of thermodynamics comes into play.
But it's just like good. Like when we think about IVB, it's no longer as important to think about raw vertical movement. It's better to think about vertical movement vis-a-vis your release point
as a function of, and I think we talked about this before. The idea, I love this too, by the way. If you're looking at a chart like that, guys, that chart specifically, just think about it this way: the farther from the middle is, the more deceptive it is.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Clay Holmes will probably be on the bottom part of that.
Yeah,
where you see his arm slot, you see he doesn't have good sink. He's over the top. He's not going to have a good sink. And then he has great sink. And so he's on the bottom of that. Tanner Scott has more ride than you expect given his release.
And in general, above that zone will produce probably more whiff, and below that zone will produce probably softer contact.
Yeah.
Just generally, just
I think so. Yeah. And I think, but this goes back to predictability. Like we're talking about predictability, and we started with counts. But one of the reasons, there's a great piece over at Fangraphs that I do recommend reading by Kiri Oler, and it's about the search for the most predictable pitcher. And I'm going to say things that I think could take the research further, but you should read it because he talks about just who's the most predictable pitch in certain counts. And the reason why, there's a couple things. I tried to look at swing rates on these pitchers that he highlighted, and there wasn't really really obvious patterns. I think it's because a player can play with how predictable they are. If you start thinking they're predictable, then oh my gosh, now I can, and you start swinging a lot. Because I think if someone's predictable, you start swinging a lot. That's what we saw with the Red Sox. People started swinging at their sliders because they were being predictable using their sliders so much. And so I would say swing rates are when the batter thinks he knows what's coming, and so he's going to swing a lot. If you become predictable, the batter swings a lot. Oh, boom! Now's the time for me to throw a slider. When they thought fastball, so, the pitcher can play with that. And the other instance is there are other ways to be unpredictable. We were just talking about Emmanuel Clase throws his cutter. Kenley Jansen throws his cutter 95% of the time in these counts. He's totally predictable, but he's not, because the pitch itself has unpredictability to it. The pitch itself, Tanner Scott's fastball itself, is weird. The batter has a rubric in his brain that's like, I see slot, I see this, I see spin, and they can't even put words to it because it's a thing they developed over their life, and it's not in the part of the brain that uses words. It's in the animal brain. It's like, oh, swing. It's just that animal reaction, and that computer is looking at the slot and doing all that can be thrown off by doing weird things with your hand, having good spin, having more ride than you expect from that slot, that sort of stuff. So predictability is, and then you can be predictable in terms of location. So there's location, type, and just the physical characteristics of your pitch. So it's really hard to nail predictability. You can sort of look at counts, and you can look at this, and you can look at that, but then the pitcher is still going to find ways to play with you. Oh, you expected fastball. Walker Buehler used to do this. You expected fastball. If it's not high, it's low.
And sometimes you can throw all this out the window. So Trevor's been working on something with David Bednar, who we talked about earlier in the week. Bednar, by the stuff metrics, seemingly has everything working. But Trevor, what is David Bednar doing that's basically negating the quality of his stuff right now?
Tipping. Yeah. And he's been tipping all year, and he's been tipping in different ways. Now, this is early in the year. I believe these are back-to-back road trips. I don't think this is the same road trip, but basically he started the year pinning his hands against his body like that, like we see. And on the left, you see a fastball with a vertical glove, and on the right, you see a splitter, which is a horizontal glove. And this is consistent. These are just the most clear versions, but like in both outings, he did both in both of these outings. I just couldn't get as good of a screenshot.
Was his leg weird too, or?
So his leg, I think that might be more a camera angle. It's
just
a little
when you took the picture.
And timing of the shot probably a little bit too. Yeah.
But he also, when he's coming up, his leg height is slightly different depending on the glove. So the glove on the splitter on this right, he keeps his glove a little bit lower than his swoosh just for the whole time. Even at glove separation on the fastball, it goes a little higher. All this little stuff. And then recently, he has started he moved his hands away from his body. And I think there's something that he knows about a little bit, but unfortunately, he's a guy who grabs his grip as he's delivering. And he's a splitter. And he's been throwing a splitter a lot more because his curveball has been high, or he hasn't commanded it as well, probably because he's been tipping it and a little worried about it getting hit hard. And when he does that, he's doing another thing with his wrist and like tapping his wrist against the top of his glove on breaking pitches, and then or on fastballs, and not doing it on the off speed. And that was like recently he had a clunker. He did that. So he's got two different tips. And he's still kind of tipping in different ways, but he's trying to find some comfort with his hands. And that's the only way to explain his year so far, because there's no worse way to be unpredictable than tipping your pitches. And the way that guys are swinging at his splitter, because splitters are not easy pitches to just like come out of your shoes on when a guy throws 98 with. He's thrown the hardest he's ever thrown. He has the highest IVB he's ever thrown.
Yeah.
And his command's the same on his 4-seam fastball, yet it's getting hit the hardest. It's because I think what he's doing is the people can create off-speed pitch buckets and then fastball buckets, and they're guessing one or the other, and that is making his fastball worse. But it's still the best pitch for them to hit, and that's why they're hitting that pitch the hardest. The other two pitches haven't performed any. They're not great, but they haven't performed way worse than in past years. But his fastball has, and I think it's because he's tipping the other ones.
Yeah,
I would explain it, but like tip. We could talk everything we talked about before. Does not matter if you're tipping.
he throws it out the window. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that makes you predictable, even if your counts are great and you throw a weird fastball and like, oh, but I can see when you're doing it.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Bryce Miller, and he's just like always shoving, like even when we were just talking to each other, he's just always shoving the ball into his splitter grip.
Always.
And so what he does is while he's getting the count, he's putting his hand, like as soon as he gets the ball from the catcher, he puts the ball in his hand in the splitter grip. So if he's got the ball dangling, it's in a splitter grip. When he puts the ball in his hand in the glove, it's a splitter grip. So that he never has to do. He actually has a pretty deep too. So he's never has to be like trying to shove it in there. And I had to do that with my eldest, where I'm like, dude, I can you're trying to get the ball in the curveball grip. I can see you're. Yep. Is this gonna be a curveball?
This is a lacrosse ball, so I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Got tight feet. But this is how Bryce Miller throws a splitter, same as mine.
Yeah.
We threw ours the same way. So what we do is we both go split. I did this till the last year of my career. I didn't throw the splitter anymore, but it made me have to change the grip every single pitch. I didn't throw that pitch anymore.
Oh, that's fun. That's a fun way. Yeah, you could just put it in some grip that's totally different.
If you can do anything, kids at home, grip a pitch, grip a knuckleball as you go behind your back and then come up. So you have to move it. If you don't pick a pitch, you don't throw. And so you have to grip every time. That's helpful. But getting a splitter first when you throw it, it's also like it's a dig pitch, and that can take away from needing to do it later. The thing with Bednar is I think he does come with the split, but it's looser. And when he's going, he like digs as he's delivering. And that creates. He does it with the curveball too. I think it's just I did a tap. I used to tap my glove. It's just a timing thing for him, but he gets the grip tighter when he's delivering, which is changing his glove. Doing it, it's different every time.
One choice that he has is what Kirby's done is to exaggerate the thing that used to tip to the point where you're doing it on everyone. It's almost goes back to the Ryan Dempster glove bag waggle.
The wiggle, yeah.
The wiggle. So what I've noticed is with Kirby, I was watching him last night. He does this, and it looks a little obscene because he does it at belt level, like right in front of him, and it's like a.
I used to do that too. I used to fan and do it, but the problem was I would get the timing. I'd be like curveball, and I'd be like 1, 2, 3, and then fastball.
Oh yeah,
because I was getting the grip faster. So like I found it hard to fan a little bit past having the grip, keep it at the same time.
You have to fan if the grip takes a little while, you have to fan. Like if one grip takes 3 seconds to do and one grip takes 2, you have to make sure you fan to 4 every time.
Yeah.
So that you're not.
What I did the Mike. I actually did a Mike Pelfrey. I learned this from him. I created like a little pin the glove against my body, created like fanned it out as big as it could get, so it was more like a screen, and then I just wasn't touching the glove anymore. So
it was like your balls against your belly, and you're just sort of like,
I would just have the splitter grip, and then everything else was looser. So it was really easy to change, and you couldn't see it. And that's I remember doing that. I did that in 22 between 2 outings. Or 21 in between 2 outings where I thought I was tipping, did that the next outing, and then punched out the side.
That seems like a good one for Bednar because he's obviously comfortable with it against his chest.
And it looks like he's searching. It looks like he knows, but not exactly what he's doing, and he's just trying to fix things a little bit because he wouldn't change his hands as much if he didn't know about it, or maybe he's just wildly uncomfortable and just does not.
He might also be losing his curveball. I talked to him about he loses his curveball from time to time, and he said that in fact that like staying back on his back leg helps him with the curveball. So there's something about bringing the curveball up. I think you talked about a little bit that when you brought up your splitter, like it kind of changed your arm path.
He's doing that, by the way. He's doing like this whip curve. I can see it. I know exactly what he's feeling, and it's probably because he's throwing so many splitters.
Yeah,
he's also interesting, but
because he started throwing the splitter and he lost the curve. That's actually sort of how it happened the first time.
Like he's like within 90 degrees, like here a lot. It's and he looks like he's slinging it. It looks like it's just spinning out of his hand.
Yeah,
but it's funny because it's moving the same though. My movement disappeared.
But his command of it is lost.
Yeah. A lot going on, but I think starts with.
I think though I still have a lot of confidence in him long term.
Oh,
This is the kind of
100%.
stuff where it's like he's working through stuff in front of us, but it's not like, Camilo Doval on the other hand, like his extension is turfed. Like, there are weird things going on in this movement. That seems like a heavier pull, like that is weird movement for Camilo Doval. Like that's not normal for him. He's a cut. He's a class A clone, So to have that sort of sinkerish movement, I think that's a little bit harder pull. He has more work to do mechanically.
Yeah.
Bednar's work is more, maybe a little mechanically with the release in the back to find the curveball, but it's a lot of it is just, find a way you're comfortable that nobody can see what you're doing. That's
he's gonna click, and then all of the stuff that he's still all of his movement and everything is just gonna start playing.
I think he's the closer for them again next year.
I think it's gonna be fine. It's just
Yeah, Doval, that is that pitch being classified as a cutter. Just like what is that going to do? It's getting smashed this year, by the way. 557 slug allowed in that pitch. To throw a pitch that's a cutter at 99.3 and to have it get slugged that much, that is mind blowing to me.
Now you look at his extension; it's pretty far off. I mean, he's like I think he's down like 6 inches in extension. It's like.
Oh, that's not good. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that just means the whole delivery is off. Something like the whole thing is weird.
Big off-season overhaul seems like it might be in store for.
I might still, in deeper leagues and in deeper situations. If I'm the Giants, I'm holding him. He's got the good velo, and he used to have a good shape. It's just like, the sending down was a big eye opener. He said, I'm now willing to listen, basically. So hopefully they can work together to do it. But it's funny. Some guys don't throw the same way in the offseason. I just found out yesterday that George Kirby throws to a 9 pocket in the offseason.
Yeah,
that's it.
Does.
That's all he does.
Much. Even play catch. I mean, I threw it in that vast majority of the time, but he throws to a 9 pocket.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it keeps the command good.
Yeah. Learn something every day. But yeah, so definitely read that piece on Fangraphs that we mentioned, because we kind of talked about other ways that pitchers can be harder to predict, right? I think Kiri did a really nice job with that. It breaks out guys that have 2 pitches, guys that have more than 2 pitches. Not surprisingly, Seth Lugo grades out very well.
Very unpredictable.
For unpredictability. You would expect that, but lots of interesting things folded into that story. We're going to head out. On our way out the door. A reminder, you can find us on Twitter. Trevor is at I am Trevor May. Eno's at Eno Saris. I'm at Derek Van Riper. The pod is at Rates and Barrels. You can join the Discord by hitting the link in the show description. If you've got a question for a future episode, send them through that way. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode. We are back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.